Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hello and welcome once again to Cheap Shot Entertainment. This is the third and final WCW pay-per-view in their history and also in the year 2001. It was WCW Greed. It was in Jacksonville Memorial Coliseum in Jacksonville, Florida. I did try to find out whether it was the same venue as AEW's Daly's Place. And it was just maybe updated, but it is a completely different place. It was attended by 5,030 screaming WCW fans, and it took place on the 18th of March 2001. Incidentally, just before this pay-per-view on Thunder, that was the last episode of Thunder, and a couple of days later it was the last episode of, well, actually no, it was the last episode of Nitro about a week after, before WCW would be dissolved and absorbed by WWE. Again, decent pay-per-view, not as good as Super Brawl, and it was a bit of a fizzling out of WCW, but let's see everything that's happened on that show, and I want to take you through it all.
This is awesome!
First match of the evening, it would involve two no-namers, so to speak. So, you know, they're really putting the cards behind the youth, the unknown, because it is the unknown for WCW at this point. But we get a wrestler called Kwee. Let's not judge a book by his name, because he was actually pretty decent. Wearing all pink, got his hair spiked up, receding, but I mean, he was pretty decent, and he put on a really good match here, along with Jason Jett, who apparently got a big win on Nitro the week before. There was one incident in this match which looks nasty, or it could have been a lot nastier than it was. Jet goes for a super powerbomb, but Wee Man reverses and hits a Hurricane Runner. I've got to think that almost it was a fight or flight response from Kwee, because had that not, I mean, it looked like he was jumping and, you know, he was going to like smash his head into the cameras, and it would have been nasty. But a fight or flight response, they changed it in midair, and fair play to them, they worked on that. But it could have ended a lot worse. Kwee taking complete control, but Jet is still fighting. Kwee getting booed by the fans. Jet is obviously a fan favourite here. A head collision, and Kwee is sent to the outside, whilst Jet decides to just lie in the middle of the ring and goes down. Kwee tries for the tightrope elbow drop off the rope and misses completely. The crash landing, which is a throwaway suplex for the win by Jason Jett. I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 stars. Good opening for the show. Good match from 2 stars, given the chance to shine. I've got on my notes here, so that is always a good thing. The second match on the show was to crown the very first and only Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions in WCW. It was Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo versus Kidman and Mysterio from the Filthy Animals. Culmination of a tournament to crown the new champions. And incidentally here noted that Mysterio is wearing a half mask, probably noting his heritage, his past, but his potential future with WWE. He does take that off, and I was like, all the time he was doing his entrance, I was thinking, how the heck are you going to wrestle in that? But yeah, again, good showcase for the Cruiserweights here, and it's a shame that having introduced this championship, it would be so short-lived. in terms of a championship and a division, because it would be Kid Romeo and Elix Skipper who would get the win here. Mysterio telegraphing a Acai moonsault from the top, from the ropes to the inside, who is caught and hit by the last kiss from Romeo. Kid Romeo would pick up the victory over the much more experienced Rey Mysterio. I'm going to give this one 2.5 cheap shots out of 5. Again, really good, really entertaining match. Nowhere near perfect, probably not given enough time really to shine even further than it should have, but ultimately a very competent match and showcase of the future. We're now backstage with Buff Bagwell, Ric Flair, Jeff Jarrett and Road Warrior Animal as they gloat about all the things that they've managed to achieve in a very short time in WCW. Stacy Keibler comes down to the ring and introduces the Mecca of Manhood and hits the promo button. Sean Stasiak, suppose he was good to look at, he was okay in the ring, but in terms of cutting promos, he needed some work, man. So Sean Stasiak versus Bam Bam Bigelow. He was calling out Bam Bam Bigelow, calling him a fat sweat hog and toothless fat sweat hog with lots of tattoos, and took homage to this and decided to have a match. It wasn't very good. Keibler gets the distraction and Stasiak gets the win in this one. Really disappointing match because Bigelow can do a lot better than this, and I don't think he was allowed to because they were banking on Sean Stasiak, and that's why I'm going to give this match a 1 cheap shot out of 5. It's a match that accurately reflects Sean Stasiak's career in WCW, the end of his career, and the career that never really got going in WWE. Accurate reflection, I'm afraid. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Storm gets serious once more, and the national anthem, which he calls for every single time, says he's been doing this for 8 months. They should know how to hit the play button by now. The national anthem never happened, but we do get a tag match as a result, because it is Team Canada versus the Laughing Man Hugh Morris, who interrupts the non-existent Canadian national anthem. I'm guessing they weren't allowed to play it, and he runs down to the ring, doesn't wait for his tag team partner, who turns out to be Conan. Team Canada gets the win with a running awesome bomb, which is a crucifix bomb from the corner, in a very, very short match, which I'm going to give 2 cheap shots out of 5 because it was competent for the short amount of time that they were allowed to do stuff, but ultimately was a bit of a throwaway match, really. And it was a massive shame to let these 4 guys go by the wayside. And it was just a massive shame, and I'm saying that a lot in this pay-per-view review because there's a lot of things they did that could have been done a heck of a lot better. So we go on to next the backstage segment where the Rhodes boys, father and son, Dustin and Dusty, were getting ready, and a tray of burritos would come their way, which Dusty would apparently eat all of them. Bagwell interviews Rick Steiner now in his vlog, an early version of his video vlog, and they sort of have a laugh and stuff, and it's the Cruiserweight Championship up for grabs next. It is Sugar Shane Helms who won the 6-person elimination match at Super Brawl, who would challenge Guerrero for his championship. And it would be the New Blood, and I've said that a lot, that's one thing I really did like about this pay-per-view. It would be the New Blood in Shane Helms who would go over the old guard in Chavo Guerrero and would pick up the victory using the Vertebreaker to win the championship. Again, great showcase of the cruiserweights, two decent cruiserweights who would go on to bigger things in WWE. I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 cheap shots as the Sugar Babies. Not quite sure where they came up with that name, but obviously it's Sugar Shane Helms. I'm sure they could have called them the Sugar Canes or something, I don't know. But it's basically the Nitro Girls dancing around him, celebrating the championship win, and your new Cruiserweight champion for March 2001 was Sugar Shane Helms. Next segment is Flair talking about his match and Booker T talking about his US Championship match with the dog-faced gremlin, Rick Steiner. We go on to the Tag Team Championships now. It is the WCW Tag Team Championships with Totally Buffed going against Sean Stasiak, Sean O'Hare and Chuck Palumbo, who are the current Tag Team Champions. Totally Buffed get totally stuffed in this match because it wouldn't take very long for Palumbo to hit, well, I think it was Luger hitting Buff to give them the opening, and Sean O'Hare hitting 2 Swanton bombs to pick up the victory and retain the championships. Not a very long match. I'm going to be nice to this one and give it 1 out of 5 cheap shots. Not long enough to really give anything better, but certainly worked in their favour going forward. And I'm going to mention that company again, WWE, certainly going forward to WWE. And we get the Ernest the Cat Miller in another match next, and it is versus Canyon, who picked up the victory over DDP, who then picked up the victory over Jeff Jarrett at the last pay-per-view. There's lots of kicks in this one to finish it off. I get the feeling that Canyon and Miss Jones had a little card going there, with Canyon coming on to Miss Jones. She would hit the roundhouse kick, miss Canyon the first time, hit Ernest the Cat Miller, stop the pin, hit Canyon again with that same roundhouse kick, and it was very impressive. It would then be Ernest the Cat Miller who would hit the thrust kick on Canyon to pick up the victory. I'm going to give this one 2 cheap shots out of 5, as it was basically your standard Ernest the Cat Miller match. Not great, but not entirely bad either. United States Championship is up for grabs next. It is Booker T, who wanted to come back and go for the WCW Heavyweight Championship, but then said, okay, DDP, you've got your chance, I will go after the next one. Let's wrestle that power away from Ric Flair. Booker T versus Rick Steiner. Booker T hits the bookend to win this one, after it would be a little bit more of WCW's standard interference, but it would be Shane Douglas who would interfere this time. Having his arm broken by Scott Steiner, he would clock Rick Steiner over the head with the cast, which would give Booker T the chance to hit the bookend and win the championship. As I say, standard, really good match. 2 excellent veterans of the wrestling world, 2 teams of brothers. They had a similar path in terms of the professional wrestling circuit. Obviously Booker and Stevie Ray would come from a different area of the wrestling world, whereas you had the Steiners coming from the University of Michigan, having been All-Americans on the wrestling team. So when it comes to professional wrestling, it's a very even slate. And like I say, it would be Booker T hitting the bookend, which would eventually become the counter move to the Rock's rock bottom when he went over to WWE. But yeah, decent match this one, really enjoyed this one. I'm going to give this one 3 cheap shots out of 5. Good match, hard fought, and the beginning of the end for Ric Flair's balance of power in WCW and the company. Moving on next, it is Ric Flair and Jarrett versus Dustin and Dusty. I've got Dusty Dustin here. That's not one person, that is two people. Dustin would enlist his dad, Dusty Rhodes, who had just had a whole tray of burritos, and I was wondering why that was a thing, because never really explained why that was a thing. But Flair comes down to the ring, he says he's not wrestling. Jarrett's going to take you both on at the same time, and it would be Animal who would take his place. The referee chucks Animal out of ringside because they don't want, interference in this one, because apparently it is a kiss my ass match. Yeah, that's the significance behind the burritos. But Flair then wrestles, like I say, and Animal is sent to the back. Flair and Jarrett on top for most of this one, getting the heat, the heel heat on the babyface and the youngest member of this match, Dustin Rhodes. It would be then Dusty who would get the tag, a hot tag, and it was that point where Flair and Jarrett would try and hit the double figure four leg lock. Both guys would then kick out, and it would be Jarrett who would try and hit that again on Dustin, and Rhodes would again kick out. Jarrett then succumbs to the roll up as he bounces off the corner. Dustin Rhodes gets the roll up, and it would be Jeff Jarrett who would have his face stuffed into the keister of Dusty Rhodes, an absolute legend in the sport of professional wrestling, which is not really a sport, more of an entertainment, but a legend nonetheless. Pulls his trousers down, he's got bright red underpants on, and sticks his face into Jeff Jarrett's nose. 2.5 cheap shots out of 5 for this one. Not a great technical masterpiece, but did the job for the storylines presented on the show. And again, wrestling that power away from Ric Flair. Very, very slowly at this point, but it was a balance of power nonetheless. Main event time now. It is the WCW Heavyweight Champion Scott Steiner versus DDP, the last throw of the dice for WCW, trying to wrestle that power back from Flair. It's not even the NWO anymore. That doesn't exist. Michael Buffer does his thing and says, "Are you ready?" And everyone says yes, and does the introductions and stuff, and we get Scott Steiner versus DDP. Madazia would come down to the ring with Scott Steiner, and ever present in Scott Steiner matches in WCW. I think she's called Madazia, get that feeling from the commentary, and would ultimately cause DDP to bleed from the forehead. There was lots of interference here. Rick Steiner would come out, get some revenge on DDP for his loss in the US Championship match, even though DDP had nothing to do with it. But it's all balance of power, isn't it? And with Madazia and Rick Steiner both down at ringside, Scott Steiner would get the Steiner recliner on DDP once again after DDP managed to get to the ropes the first time, and the referee would hold his hands up. They would fall down 3 times, and that would give Scott Steiner the victory. Now, I was trying to work out what was going to happen here, whether Booker T was going to come out and challenge for the title, because it would be Booker T who would go into WCW, from WCW to WWE with the championship. I think that might have happened on Nitro, and I'm actually wanting to watch Nitro, the very last Nitro, where Shane McMahon comes down and says he owns the company now. After the match, there was some tomfoolery, but I'm going to give this a 3.5 cheap shots out of 5 first, before Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, Madazia would continue to beat up DDP. With all the rest of the baby faces out of the company, there would be no one to save DDP at this point, and they would just continue beating the tar out of DDP with the steel pipe. Scott Steiner is victorious. good match with a very WCW ending, but that, like I say, that takes it down by half. Cheap Shot, but overall it was a decent match, much better than the main event in both Sin and Super Brawl. So WCW Greed overall was just an okay show, a bit of a fizzle out into obscurity as the company would be absorbed into WWE, but it did a lot for a lot of people, and one of the things I admire about this show is the passing of said torches, the WCW Tag Team Championships, the introduction of the Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships, Sugar Shane Helms picking up the Cruiserweight Championship, as well as Booker T taking the victory, who was very reasonably young at this point, taking the US Championship from Scott Steiner, but it would be from Rick Steiner, sorry, but it would be the final match, which would be the downfall. Scott Steiner would come away with the championship, and there was a couple of throwaway matches in there as well that I'm sure, if you watched the shows in between, would be very much explained. In terms of me understanding what was going on in this one, I would still be very, very confused, but that is WCW in a nutshell. This would be the last pay-per-view we would ever see from the company. It would never be updated or reused, but we have got other things, assets being used in WWE, such as war games and things like that, so that's good. And unfortunately, like I say, the company fizzled out a little bit, but we would get to see a lot of that younger talent coming over to WWE for the invasion angle. That is your lot for retro reviews for WCW in 2001. You're watching this video exactly 20 years after the original pay-per-view aired. You've been Cheap Shot Nation. I have been your host Luke, and I will see you next time for more retro reviews as well as current affairs in the wrestling world. Don't forget to go over and check out Cheap Shot Entertainment System, the video games channel. We're still rolling along with that one, and Quick Shot Reviews. There's plenty to go at on there as well, so go and check those channels out, as well as Squared Circle Jobbers. My good friend Ben, hopefully we'll be going to WrestleMania at the end of this month. Fingers crossed. We might already be there by the time we're watching this video. I've been your host Luke, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.
Hiya.